I want to thank you for being here today. It's indeed an honor to have the Senator King select Brunswick, not only as his home, but to make this incredible announcement that he's going to present. And it's indeed Brunswick American Legion Post 20's honor and privilege to provide a venue for him to make this important announcement to all veterans. Again, I want to welcome each and every one of you here. Thank you and enjoy. Senator?
Let's sit down, shall we? After some considerable lobbying over the last year, as of Thursday night, I'm officially a member of the Veterans Affairs Committee of the United States Senate. And I'm really excited about it because I've been doing a lot of work on veterans, and now Teague Morris will be able to bother me even more, you see, because he'll have more room. But no, I'm really excited. I've looked at the list of the committee. Jon Tester is the chair of Montana. He is sincerely one of my very best friends in the Senate. And looking down the list, Dan Sullivan of Alaska, let's see, Mike Round, South Dakota, Richard Blumenthal, Sherrod Brown. It's a really good committee, and you'll be glad to know it's almost an entirely nonpartisan committee. You know, there are Republicans and Democrats and now me, but the committee operates and has operated on a nonpartisan basis historically, and that's the way to get things done. And this committee is one of the most productive in the Congress. I looked over the list of bills passed in the last year by various committees. Most are in the 5 to 10 range of bills that are actually passed by the Senate and the House go to the President. The Veterans Affairs Committee in the last 2 years has had 49 bills signed by the President. That's a very productive committee in the United States Congress, and they are getting things done. And I should say, occasionally we do get things done. You don't always read about it because conflict sells newspapers, but there's a lot that's getting done on a bipartisan basis. A lot of my best friends are on both sides of the aisle. There are things that are hard to do, there's no doubt about that, but there are a lot of things on a bipartisan basis. One of the biggest was this year, the PACT Act, the burn pit bill, that's been waiting for 10 or 15 years, and I can tell you Jon Tester really carried that over the line on his shoulders, and that's one of the most important veterans bills passed probably in the last 15 or 20 years. So this is a great committee. I'm really excited to be on it, and before we begin today, I brought a gift for the Post. I'm going to present it to Dave. This is a flag that was flown over the U.S. Capitol last week. Dave, for the Post.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Now, the idea today is for me not to make speeches. I've just made the longest speech I'm going to make today, but more to listen. Because as I embark on this new committee assignment, and I looked on the schedule, I think we have a meeting tomorrow, as soon as we get back, either tomorrow or Wednesday. This is more about listening for me. I think that's a big part of my job. And so what I want to do is go through, you know, just what's on your mind. What's the unfinished business? What can we do in Washington to deal with some of the deep problems that we're all wrestling with, veteran suicide, PTSD, health care generally, support for TOGAS, support for the CBOX, broadening that capability, serving rural America veterans better, and that's where Tester and I get together. He's from Montana, and we have a lot, our states have a lot in common. And I got to, Tester is a wonderful guy. He's a great big fellow, and on one hand he only has 2 fingers. When he was 8 years old, he lost 3 fingers literally in a meat grinder on his family farm. He's a real live farmer. I think he's the only farmer in the Senate. He goes home every weekend and is on the plow. He's a wheat farmer in Montana. He and his wife run run a pretty good sized farm out there, and he lost. So on his campaign posters it has his hand, you know, and he says things like, you know, I'll give you 7 instead of 10. But an absolutely wonderful guy. He and I have a great relationship, and fortunately, it turns out, I have a very good relationship with the head of the Veterans Administration, Dennis McDonough. Dennis, I got to know, he was Barack Obama's chief of staff, and he's a very down-to-earth, easy to talk to guy. And in fact, he and I got together in the airport this past Thursday or Thursday on my way back up here, and he's coming up. I've invited him up. We don't have a date yet, but I want him to see the new CBOC in Portland. And so he's going to come up to Maine and visit with us. That's always a good, of course, a good relationship to have, as well as with Tracy Davis up at Togus. So lots of work to do. I know one of Tester's priorities is oversight over what the VA is doing. In other words, it's not enough to just pass the bill. You've got to see how they're making it work, how they're implementing the bill, like the PACT Act. And that's, I know, one of John's highest priorities this year. The Richard Starr Act is a priority, the health care generally, and one of the issues that I'm most interested in is the transition between active duty and veteran status. I've been saying for years, in fact, I think it was the first year I was down there on the Armed Services Committee, that the Pentagon should put as much money and time and effort into the transition out as they do recruiting. Because the data is that a lot of the suicides and a lot of the problems occur in the first couple of years after leaving active duty. And that's one of the things that I'm very, very interested in. And there are 3 or 4 of us on the committee, on the Veterans Committee, that are also, and I'm one of them, on armed services. So it makes a nice combination that I have the ability to oversee, if you will, the Pentagon as well as the VA. And that's part of our job. So that's a little bit of an outline of where the priorities are and what we're going to do. But I want to add to that list today. So let's see. I'm not sure if we've got an order. Why don't we just start with Dave Richmond and see and get some thoughts. I'm just looking for ideas, thoughts, and what do you think the priorities should be? Start with you, Dave.
Thank you, Senator, and again, congratulations.
Bureau of Veteran Services, State of Maine.
Thank you. I'm David Richmond, and I'll start out by just saying that there's a lot of good news, and a lot of people in the room here are to blame for that. We all work together on the challenges that our state has. I'd like I know the governor's aides de camp are here, and I'd like them to just raise their hands and show the senator who you are. Thank you. Also, the Governor's Challenge team, who's working to reduce veterans suicide, and state veterans homes also. Okay. Senator, there's, for our Bureau and our teams going forward for this year, you touched on transitioning service members to our state. That's an area that we're going to be looking at closely. We've been working as the National Association of State Directors of Veterans Affairs. We've lobbied Department of Defense for years to see if we could improve a service member's transition when they select their state and come home. Are there things that we could do? Are there things that DOD can do to smooth that transition? And in our state, we realized just recently that there's more that we can do. And we're starting to take a proactive outreach in contacting service members. We get their DD-214s when they elect our state to come back to, and we get their phone number. So
you get them. Are you allowed to share them with the VSOs?
We can share them with VBA. We've broke the code on how to share basic contact information with veterans in our state, and we're allowed to share it with members of our team. But importantly, our Bureau of Veteran Service Officers are actually calling service members as they come back to our state right now and getting an email address, sending them a welcome letter full of 2 pages of things we want them to know.
Is there, in some states, they've developed like a buddy system. Are we working on that, where somebody's sort of assigned to greet and bring a veteran into the community?
We do. We have another thing I was going to mention today is we're working on our second Veterans Expo, and we piloted that last September. And the goal of these expos is to get veteran resources together with all of our partners, the VA, VBA, our Bureau, veteran service organizations, and try to draw veterans out and encourage them to self-identify as veterans in their community and connect them with peer-to-peer organizations.
That's what we did.
Organizations that'll take them ice fishing or turkey hunting, but more importantly, put them with other veterans where they can share experiences and have the battle buddy relationship that you're talking about. And it was a great success. We had over 300 people attend our first event. 150 of them were service members or veterans. This was an initiative of our Governor's Challenge team, which is the goal: identify the veterans in your state, connect them to resources, offer screening services for suicide ideation, and then connect them to the people that can help them, and also encourage safe storage of lethal means. All of those things were accomplished in that one event. We're doing another one in Bangor.
Great.
And those organizations are there, like Pineland Farms and Operation Reboot.
Often it's just a question of making the connections, of
That's right.
helping to navigate.
Yep. And the goal of these events is to find the veterans that we don't know. In our Bureau, you know, we know that there's about 107,000 veterans in our state. We know and have record of about half of them.
Wow.
And we need to find the other half. And that's one of our big missions. It's also a mission of the Governor's Challenge. Find the service members, veterans in your state, connect them with the resources that they've earned through their service. That's one of our big goals. Another is, and that's all related to reducing suicide. You mentioned that transition period is very important, and that's why we're going to be reaching out as a Bureau within 30 days, again at 90 days, and again at 180 days, and just checking in on them, seeing if they need to come in.
So you now can get contact information.
We can get a telephone number.
Okay.
And a service member can elect to share an email address. If that's happened, we can contact them with an electronic email. But not every service member elects to do that. So this is where I think DOD comes in. I think if DOD changed their curriculum in the TAP process and just said in a 5-minute block of instruction, basically, that every service member that's transitioning gets, if they all had the opportunity to connect with their gaining state, take out your cell phone, send the state of Maine an email saying, I'm coming. What does your state have for me? That's an opportunity for us to make a direct connection to that transitioning now veteran. And that's something that I think that's an opportunity still in Department of Defense.
Good.
And you know, another thing our state is struggling with. You all know that we have a big state here, but we're a small community, and we have rural challenges. Our state veterans homes have been in the news for the last few years, struggling with rural problems of our state and a declining population. I think little tweaks in the statute and in the federal rule that allow these remote state veterans homes to thrive will be a game changer for our state.
Yeah, I've talked to the new director on that.
And I look forward with finding solutions like
Good.
that too. I don't want to hog the microphone.
Go ahead.
Your turn, Craig.
Go ahead.
You pretty much covered it all, Dave. Obviously, I'm with Craig Floyd with Disabled American Veterans. I'm Senior Vice Commander for the state of Maine. Our main concern is obviously getting all their veterans their benefits that they're authorized when they get out. We just had one of our meetings yesterday where I brought up the fact that a lot of our population is dwindling. I know that our World War II veterans are down to, I think, below 1,000, something like that. But I said, the fact remains, we have veterans from a 20-year war now that we need to concentrate on and help them out. And a lot of them don't know they don't know the benefits that they have. And I think we just need to get the word out for that, and to make sure the VA does an awesome job, especially here in the Maine. But you know, making sure that they get the best care taken care of.
Good. That's the idea. I like the idea of doing something on the statute to expand the eligibility for the veterans' homes, particularly Caribou and Machias, where it's a very rural area. And of course, the other problem is staffing in those areas. But there aren't many other options up there. That's the issue. Let's see, Jennifer.
Yes, good morning. Jennifer Lane, the State Commander for the VFW. As you know, the #1 priority for the VFW is to finally pass the Major Richard Starr Act, where Chapter 61 veterans who are retired with combat-related injuries or illness, this would eliminate the offset so they receive full retirement pay and full VA benefits that they earn and they deserve.
Which now there's an offset between the disability and the pensions.
Because of the service, they're less than 20 years when they've been separated and retired for those illnesses or service-related injuries.
You'll be glad to know that's one of Tester's highest priorities.
And I appreciate your continued conversation about that over the last couple of years.
Yeah, this may be the year. We're certainly going to try.
We hope so. We hope so.
Well, please be sure to talk to your national so they're talking to their senators.
Yes.
Believe me, it makes a big difference. We'll be down there at the beginning
of March.
Okay.
And we'll meet, we'll have another conversation.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not worried about me. I'm worried about some of these other folks that need to hear from you.
The National Commander-in-Chief will be there.
That's good.
The other thing, I would like to thank you for co-sponsoring and willing to support the GUARD VA Benefit Act. This will prevent predatory law firms from taking advantage of the veterans and their families by providing oversight and fines. This would be a reinstatement of those penalties, especially with now that we have the Camp Lejeune and other with the PACT Act. This is important to pass.
Yeah, we have to be sure the money goes to the veterans and not to the you-know-whos.
Yes, yes.
See how political I can be sometimes? Everybody knew. Anyway, what else?
Right now, those are, of course, veteran suicide and making, like you said, we've talked about making that transition and those resources available to our transitioning service members, because the numbers are high, especially in the first 5 years.
Yeah.
So.
Well, some of you may know over the last couple of years I've been doing little interviews. It reminded me of my days at Channel 10 of veterans just getting their stories from across Maine. And the interviews are now at the Library of Congress. There's a Veterans History Project going on. And I've done, I don't know, 7 or 8, 9 of these interviews. And in one of them, the fellow was a Air Force veteran. And he, from his own observation, believed that there was a connection between your occupation in the military and suicide. And nobody had ever looked at that before. So in talking to him, he said, you know, somebody ought to look at that. So we were able to get an amendment in the National Defense Act this year to require the Pentagon to break out veteran suicide by occupational billet so that we could see if he believed that, for example, maintenance people were particularly prone because there was so much pressure and they felt responsible for everything. So that's a good example that how this thing is supposed to work. Somebody tells me, I then go to work with the committee and it gets in. And so the point I'm making is, give me ideas. Tell me what needs fixing, and that's exactly the kind of thing we want to do.
And in the transition, I know we've spoken about it, is a lot of these service members have the week or so of the transition, the TAP program.
Right.
A lot of them aren't in that real phase of transitioning to civilian life. I'm not going to say they all don't take it seriously, but we need a little bit more than learning how to write a resume. So if we can have that.
My sense is it's sort of a routine thing. It's not.
Correct, and a lot of our transitioning service members don't really know what that transition is going to entail, whether it's a single service member or they're transitioning with a family. So our idea is maybe 3 or 5 years down that road, especially in that time frame of the higher suicide rate, is to make that class or those resources available so they can go back through that transition assistance program. And because they'll have a couple years of that civilian life and they can understand where their needs are.
Well, like I said, I think that's a big, that the Pentagon ought to do a better job. And let's make it comparable to recruitment. Let's look at the transition out budget and the recruitment budget and see. I guarantee there's a hell of a big difference. By the way, I want to congratulate you for having the patience to work with Steve DiPietro on a regular basis. That's a.
See a Pedro, he might appreciate. We'll see you in a couple of weeks, Senator. Thank you.
All right. San Pedro. Sorry. Okay. Michael, National Service Office, Paralyzed Veterans.
Good morning, Senator. Wanted to speak, you spoke briefly about an issue related to health care. So we work specifically with veterans with spinal cord injuries and neuromuscular disabilities. One of the things we see issues with is the availability of home health care for those veterans. There's an act currently in Congress called the Elizabeth Doyle Community Caregivers Act that raises the amount that VA can allow for nursing care in homes from 65% to 100%. And also addresses veteran-directed care and makes some changes to those programs. I think that would be beneficial not only to our members, but to all veterans across the state.
What's the bill called, Elizabeth?
It's the Elizabeth Doyle Home and Community Caregivers Act.
Got it. Okay. Good. Well, I'm a big believer in home care generally because, A, people like it better, and it saves everybody money. How many of you want to be in a nursing home? Let the record show nobody raised their hands. The point is you want to stay in your home as long as you can, and every day you stay in your home, it saves somebody who's paying $200 or $300 a day for nursing home care, and that's, I think, home care. It's a bargain for the taxpayers, in addition to better for the veterans, right?
It allows veterans to live with their disabilities with dignity as well, I think, which is an important everyday thing. The other thing that we note, at least for this state, is the difficulty in filling medical vacancies at the VA, just because of the location of the state and where we're at.
Yeah.
There's another legislative program out there. It's called the Careers Act. It basically will allow the VA to compete better for qualified medical personnel, increase the quality care for our veterans across the state. We think that's important not only for our veterans with spinal cord disabilities, but veterans across the state as well.
Well, one of the biggest problems in the state generally is a lack of mental health resources, particularly as you get north. Telehealth is part of that. But yeah, having the VA be able to compete to get the professionals they need is crucial.
I can tell you, in the telehealth aspect, a lot of our members and clients use that service. It's difficult for them to travel because of their disabilities. I think the local VAMC here and the VA have done a very good job broadening those abilities. I think a little bit more focus in there to allow them to continue to do that and have the appropriate funding would be very beneficial to our
Good.
veterans in that area.
Great. You good? Thank you. All right, let's talk to Dave, commander of the post.
Well, everything I wanted to talk about has already been talked about.
That won't stop you, though, Dave.
It won't stop me. But I am going to talk about, and it comes down to mental health, as you just talked about in Maine. It comes, and I'm not talking about combat veterans, I'm talking about all veterans. Veterans who saw things that they can't forget, and they would love to be able to. People who are totally affected, even though they weren't in combat, by PTSD and the effects of being involved in the military, seeing the effects of the horrendous injuries that service members have incurred. And I think especially of those service members who bring people home and the trauma that they go through. I think we need to focus on all our veterans and be sure that all our veterans, when they depart from the service, have some screening to be sure that they are going to be an effective member when they return to the community, because we want good citizens coming back to our community. Look at the people that are living in tent cities. In Brunswick, we had a veteran who froze to death on the railroad tracks in a sleeping bag. Why? Why did he not seek the help? Why did he not take the advantage of the help that was provided? I can't answer those questions. All I can do is be the commander of this post and try and do my best to serve veterans who need help. Another thing that I think is important is what I learned when in the construction of the Veterans Plaza on Main Street, Brunswick. And that has to do with ladies, women veterans. We have a great many women who served our country and our communities. And I was stunned in this process of building the Veterans Plaza at the amount of women who do not consider themselves veterans. I think that's a disgrace. These ladies signed their name to serve God and country the same as I did. They're as much a veteran as I am, and they deserve to be treated as such. I think we as a society need to honor those ladies who served our country the same as any man. I think that is one of the more critical things, because there's so many ladies who served and don't consider themselves a veteran, and that's just wrong. I think I've got it.
Thank you. Becky?
Hello, I'm Becky Conley, Department of Maine AMVETS Commander. I'm feeling very optimistic already with all of the topics that have been brought up. I would say and agree that the suicide rate needs to really be looked at hard. When you are discharged from active duty with a broken body and you come back home and you have to navigate this system, it's very heart-wrenching, and it really beats you down. So I love the idea of more liaison, maybe some more service benefits officers up at the VA when you go in for your initial doctor's appointment. Another issue, I love the concurrent retirement pay, But we have a lot of service members who were forced into retirement early for medical reasons that do not get their retirement pay. They have to forfeit that to the VA. And that would probably go along with the feelings of hopelessness when you get out. You don't have enough money, you don't know where to go, you don't know what you're doing. And it is quite an ordeal. I can tell you that firsthand.
I do.
When,
The
20 years
personnel
ago,
issues.
I used to hear everybody liked the treatment at Togus, but it was hard to get in. Has that eased somewhat? Is it a shorter wait for appointments and that kind of thing?
I would say they still need to work a little bit in that area. I've been going to the VA since 1998. That's how long I've been retired. So they all know me up there, and we have a great relationship. But I have had new members come through my post that really need more guidance, and they're like, I can't get in for 6 months. And I think that also could be a personnel issue. We need to attract more qualified personnel and fill up those billets.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the Careers Act that we were talking about, making it easier for them to compete. But this is a problem statewide. I mean, it's not unique to the VA. The healthcare, all the healthcare systems, all the private nursing homes, everybody's having trouble with staff. We don't have enough people.
I'm going to bite my tongue on that and pass it along.
Good morning. I'm Kirk Thurston, the State Commander for the American Legion, and being last works out pretty good in my favor. They've covered a lot of it. You just talked about the VA. We all must agree we have a pretty good system. We just don't have the manpower to man it properly, and it's a money issue. Nobody in their right mind, a young doctor's got all those bills to pay, student loans, when they can go to the VA and do it for the love of doing it, or go to the private sector for the big money. That's a tough choice. So when we go to the VA, we need to make sure we realize those people appreciate it, and we have to let them know that. You talked about suicide. We've all talked about, we all agree. The numbers are whatever they may be. One is too many. I think we all agree with that. The American Legion in the next 5 years have Be the One. And that program is in regards to suicide, to educate the civilians, the public, on the stigma. We've got to eliminate the stigma of suicide, whether it's veterans or first responders. Somebody mentioned buddy checks. The American Legion's been pushing hard to get that in through the VA system, the legislation. It works. They don't have to be a member of a VSO. They're a veteran. They're a neighbor, they're a friend, they're a comrade. Check on them, whether it's a phone call, a letter, or a knock on the door, especially with the cold weather in Maine. Today's beautiful. It's hard to believe. We love this 30-degree weather.
Shirt sleeve weather.
Dave, you had mentioned Operation Reaper. I appreciate that. I've seen firsthand these veterans going on these missions, they call them, whether it's fishing, hunting, gold panning, whatever it may be, no cost to the vet. And the organization is all volunteers. Some of us that have worked with them realize it's a family, and yeah, they're a little crazy, but they get the job done for the right reasons. So we have to remember that. We also have to work better on taking care of our active duty Coast Guard. We saw it happen not too long ago when the government shut down and they weren't getting paid. The VSO stepped up and made sure they were paid in Maine. Some of them would say, well, I don't need that much, I just need this much. That's where that pride kicks in as being a veteran, but they don't want to take a handout. They think it's a handout when it's a handout. So, again, we have to educate, the public and our own veterans in regards to the suicide pandemic. It's not getting any better. It's not going to go away. And I thank you all for coming this morning. And Senator King, we too will see you in a couple of weeks.
Good. Yeah, it's time to come down. By the way, I should have announced at the beginning, although I'm on the Intelligence Committee, I have no classified documents at my house. Just want you to know. Want to get that on the record. Don't get me started.
Senator, I have one more comment.
Sure, go ahead, Dave.
You most eloquently talked about activating the DOD to provide separation services and information. I would add to that that I think as part of that, the VA should be involved,
Sure.
and the respective veterans groups at the national level. I think if they work as a team, the veteran being separated, whether they are retiring or separating early prior to that at some point, if they see the DOD, the VA, the AMVETS, the Legion, VFW, all there working together to show them a way home,
Yeah.
they
agree.
can become that productive element of our community that we are looking for.
All right, what I'm going to try to do is convene just the meeting you described. VA, Defense Department, VSOs in Washington to sit down and talk about this whole process. Deal?
Outstanding.
That's
I think that's outstanding,
There-
Senator, and I think that will serve to do a lot of the things we've talked about, suicide and other problems, and nip it at the bud.
Yeah, I think sometimes different committees in the Senate operate differently, but in the Intelligence Committee, we have what are called roundtables, which aren't formal hearings where, you know, it's the senators and the witnesses, but it's more of a discussion. And I'm going to suggest to John Tester that we have a roundtable on transition and bring together all of those elements. And I think just to talk it through, and we may come up with some ideas that we can implement. And a lot of this doesn't take a law change.
Right.
This just takes talking to each other. I'll talk to. I got my notes. I'll talk to John about that idea. I think that's a good idea, Dave. Other thoughts from Sanford Springvale?
Dave, stand up. Dave, stand up. Dave Hassan, he's the former vice president of Maine Veterans in Need. I'm the president of Maine Veterans in Need. And I'm also the Homeless Veteran Committee chairman for the VFW for many years. And we did hear something about a homeless veteran who died, froze to death. And there was the VA Homeless Veteran Network Group for many years, and because of COVID, it ended. But I know from being on that committee for many years that the VA wanted to get out of the stand-down business. I think they've gone beyond and they're getting out of the homeless veteran business. You know the truth isn't the truth. We all know that, right? Well, in the VA, a veteran is not a veteran, so they don't get VA help. So then they have to go to the Bureau of Veteran Services. And then when you wind up, the people that are doing it are the volunteers that have to go to American Legion Post 202 to have the Winter Classic every year so that we can have money to be able to pay for hotel rooms for veterans who are waiting to get their $2,000 from the Bureau of Veteran Services.
What happened to the stand down? I remember going. Teague, where are you?
Well,
Remember we go every year to the stand down up at Togus. Is
the
that not?
stand down isn't at Togus anymore. For 3 years, the Bureau of Veteran Services has been doing mini mobile stand downs. They do 3 or 4. I think
Okay.
we've actually done 4 every year, haven't we?
We went mobile during COVID, and it's important to say the VHA was there, VBA was there, and all of the regular partners. And then last year we did a mobile stand-down location at Togus. And it was the highest attended. There was 35 veterans out of 75 that we
Now,
served.
the
Was
VA
that
created,
COVID?
well, the state or federal government, HUD says you have to have a COC, Continuum of Care Committee, and then they have to have a veteran committee. So the Homeless Veteran Action Committee. So they tried to migrate the Homeless Veteran Network Group into the Homeless Veteran Action Committee. It didn't happen. And now the Homeless Veteran Action Committee meets every quarterly. I mean, there's like nothing's being done by the people we need to do it. And in that meeting, in the Homeless Veteran Action Committee, I was told by a representative of another senator from the state of Maine that the homeless veterans are our responsibility. And I said, we didn't create them. We didn't make them homeless. And his response was, well, we're giving you the money to take care of it. Well, that's not enough money. That's my point.
Okay. Well, let's keep at it. And I should have begun by introducing Teague Morris, who is pretty much full-time on veterans issues. Most of you know him. If you don't, he sends a newsletter out every Monday morning that's really pretty phenomenal with all kinds of things that are going on in meetings and all those things. If you're not on his mailing list, get on it, because it's very useful. And I hope I'm not hard to reach, but you can always, Teague's up here. I'm back and forth, but Teague's up here, works out of the Augusta office. So be in touch with him, not only with individual questions, but the kind of ideas we've been talking about today, policy ideas, things. The most valuable thing to me are ideas, things that we can do that make a difference, like the suggestion to look at suicide by occupation. That didn't come out of my head. That came from a veteran who'd lived through that kind of difficult experience. So you know this community, and I really want you to be in touch. We also have a woman. Is Sarah here this morning? I thought. Sarah Grettinger. Sarah is on my staff in Augusta. Believe it or not, Sarah has a specialty in finding unpresented medals for veterans. People who earned a medal in combat at some point or in their activity, never got it, and Sarah's figured out how to penetrate the Pentagon and find them. I pinned a medal on a World War II vet a couple of years ago that earned it in the Pacific and never got it. So that's, but Sarah and Teague are amazing on getting this kind of work done. So, you know, nobody can do the kind of work that I do without a lot of good people around them. In fact, one of my mottos is, all of us are always smarter than any of us. And the other side of that is, and I tell Teague this because, you know, there's a tendency to agree with the boss. The other motto of mine is, if you and I agree all the time, one of us isn't necessary. So you got those two things right there. Other thoughts? Yes, sir.
Senator Joe Donahue from the Brunswick American Legion. And this is to the VA. If I'm not mistaken, when a member joins the military in Maine and then he retires or gets out, his DD-214 is automatically sent to the state. What I would like to see is that any veteran that says, I'm going to the state of Maine, that his DD-214 gets sent.
His or hers.
Right.
His or hers, excuse me, yes. I apologize for women veterans. That their DD-214 gets sent to the state, so now the state can reach out to that individual. Although he didn't join in the state of Maine, he retires in the state of Maine, or he returns to the state of Maine after serving here for some time.
David tells me we're on it.
We do get the DD-214s right now when they identify Maine as their transitioning state. However, there's room for improvement. We could get more information. We could get civilian email addresses. We don't get those reliably right now. And we could get updated contact information. And we could have, my personal goal is to have a conversation with that person. Somebody in our bureau talks to them before they get here to smooth
Thank
their
you.
transition.
Senator, thank you. Again, it's a pleasure having you here at Outpost.
Great to have you here. Great to be here.
Good morning, Senator. Thank you for being here, and congratulations on your new role.
Thank you.
Can you hear me okay, everybody?
Yeah.
I wanted to just mention a couple of things. Dave, thank you very much for bringing up about what the Bureau's doing with the connections, with everything. When I was interviewed by the Senator, one of the things I brought up about this, I call it a buddy program, is think about you know, a veteran coming back and maybe having another veteran, not the Bureau or an organization, but an actual one-on-one connection with a veteran coming back, kind of like the buddy program would be. And I've seen that work very, very well. And I'm sure there's many of us in this room that would take up the lead on, you know, being part of that. You know, I would anyway, that, you know, if somebody was coming back and wanted to have a sort of a real person that they know they could contact, that might help eliminate, you know, veteran suicide and a lot of
It would seem to me that wouldn't be hard to organize.
No, not at
It
all.
would be a question of putting the word out, who's willing to volunteer,
Exactly.
and then making the connections.
Yeah, maybe that's something the Governor's Council with the aide-de-camps, maybe that's something they could look at doing as well. The other thing I wanted to mention was military women. Commander, thank you for bringing that up about, you know, the women maybe not being recognized. I think it's they don't tell their story a lot of times because they don't feel like they're worthy of any recognition, or they didn't do enough, or they didn't serve in combat, that sort of thing. My role in the state, I'm the state ambassador for a National Military Women's Memorial in DC, and my goal is to try to connect with all of our women veterans, active duty, National Guard reserves, and get them to tell their story so that we can put that on their national memorial. And that has helped a lot of women come forward with their stories and feel better about themselves. So if anybody wants information about that afterwards or at any time, please let me know. March is Women's History Month. You know, I'm trying to think of some ideas on how we can bring more women together that have served during the month of March. I know there's a lot of different activities going on in the state, but I think, you know, there's a lot more that we could do as well. One of the things that I love to do is, and some of you have probably seen it, you know, especially with our senior women veterans, is, you know, recognize them for their service during World War II and Korea and Vietnam. And, you know, it's just very meaningful to them. Let's see here. Military sexual trauma. I don't think I've heard that word in here this morning. I know it's a scary word for, you know, men and women both. And I have a private Facebook group. It's called Maine Women Veterans, where I have over 1,400 women, and I think most of the women veterans in here are probably in this group. But this group, you know, it's a Facebook group. It is private, but there's so many women that have, their lives have been changed because they've had other women in this group reach out and support them. I got a message the other day just from a woman that said, you know, it's been 18 years since I got out of the service and I was sexually assaulted. And now I feel strong enough where I can come forward. And so I'm going to connect with her on the phone tomorrow and kind of lead her into whatever direction it goes. But that's another source. If somebody knows a woman veteran out there that needs help with anything and feels like maybe talking to another woman veteran would be helpful, please let me know. I may not be the best person for them, but I'm sure I can find somebody that would talk to them. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Sir.
Good morning, Senator. Chris McGee. I was on the Maine Veteran Voices. I'm the one that kind of presented the idea for the
No, I
For the,
I didn't recognize you.
Yeah, for the suicide analysis by job code.
And now it's the law.
Correct, which is like, for me, it was life-changing, really. Like, I had spent probably 1,000 hours of my own time trying to get the information. Dave, I think you said it beautifully, that like the trauma that people experience in the military is not just restricted to people that served in combat. That's a lot of what that job code analysis is. The Air Force consistently has security forces, aircraft maintainers, and intel as their highest rates of suicide, the top 3 per capita. And only one of those is engaged in kinetic activity, and that's not all the time, because I think the reality is those traumas happen through just the stress of being in the military and the high ops tempo. And thankfully, and I attribute it much to the draft of the language in the National Defense Authorization Act, the Air Force stood up an aircraft maintainer focus group to find out what's going on in the aircraft maintenance community, which I served in for 20 years. I joined the group. I presented another good idea of basically doing a post-suicide analysis of the unit in line with what a safety investigation board would be for an aircraft mishap. What was the cultural issues going on? That was presented to General C.Q. Brown of the Air Force. I'm now part of the working group to stand it up and do some test beds. Unfortunately, while that working group has been working on what that model will look like, there's been 2 maintainer suicides across the world in the last 2 weeks. So much of the talk I'm having with Air Force Surgeon General leadership is they don't have the resources to do the model that I'm presenting. And I might be over-promising, but it's like, you know, this study's going to come out at the end of the year.
Tell them you know a guy.
I have, but I'm just working through a Gmail account. They're like, I'm not sure if he's legit or not. But, you know, I'm saying, hey, I want this team to have a psychologist on board to go to these units and examine what the organizational culture is. And they go, we don't have enough psychologists. I'm like, you're going to have money. You can't, like, if you go to Congress and say, we developed this wonderful program to look at what the causes are of suicide, Congress is not going to say no.
Yeah.
So I think they're suffering from what a lot of people in the military are suffering from. You know, I just recently retired. It's that under-resources, it's the overstrain. Even the psychologists think they don't have the resources to solve this problem. So I guess this is just my heads up that when this study comes out, and I think the numbers are going to be stark and surprising, there's going to be a need for resources to address the problem as well.
Well,
thank you for what you've done, and I'll probably need more help.
Well, let's keep in touch, and understanding the problem is the beginning of finding a solution. So thanks, Chris, for the idea.
Good morning, Senator King.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Brenda Pennells, and I am one of the aides-de-camp for Governor Mills. I'm also the civilian aide to the Secretary of the Army for Maine and president of MOA. And I'm on the Fort Drum Retiree Council, which does service all of New England as well as upstate New York and U.S. veterans living in Canada, actually. I wanted to talk to you about a special group of veterans today. We've had some great topics. I wanted to talk specifically about military retirees, so people that have served 20 years or maybe are medically retired. And these people, as you know, they have TRICARE for their health insurance. And when they turn 65 years of age, they have Medicare plus TRICARE, TRICARE for life at that point. And it seems that every year the Congressional Budget Office comes up with a list of recommendations of how to, you know, cut some costs. And TRICARE for life is always on there as an area where they're going to impose a fee for TRICARE for life. TRICARE for life right now is at no cost to the retiree. They pay their
Does
Medicare.
TRICARE for life complement Medicare?
Yeah, so Medicare is the primary insurer when you reach age 65. TRICARE for life, it's kind of like a free supplement at this point. They don't pay anything for it. But this, I just read a report that was very disturbing. There's been rumblings of this every single year, but now there's actual numbers being proposed as to how much this TRICARE for life, you know, quote, premium would be. And I just wanted to get that on your radar so that if you see you know, legislation or something that would impose fees for TRICARE for life, you know, to remember that these are military retirees that have served a minimum of 20 years. You know, we all know the story about they were, you know, quote, promised free health care for life. Didn't really work out that way. You know, they now have Medicare Part B premiums. as well as increasing costs for prescription drugs for these military retirees. So
Good.
just wanted to put that out there for
Well,
you.
one of the
and-
things they tried to do this year was to eliminate a lot of pharmacies. And one of them was my friends at Wilson's Drug over in Bath, and we beat that back.
Right.
But we gotta keep watching those things.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Sarah.
Sorry, you can't have the microphone
Sarah,
quite
too.
yet. Sarah Sherman from the Maine Bureau of Veterans Services. For the last 3 years, I've been running a grant-funded dental program for veterans. There's a common misconception that veterans get their dental care from the VA, and only roughly 15% do. And right now, there is a bill in the Congress to
Why is it that low a number? Is it because there's a limit of eligibility?
100% service connected to the
That's-
VA or fit a very specific
Got it.
criteria.
It's a narrow eligibility.
Yes. So I just would like to encourage on my soapbox, dental care is as important as health care. And I would love to see that bill passed.
Does Togus have dentists?
They do, yes.
But
And
just for this narrow group of,
as well as the Bangor and Portland Seabox.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Senator, I'd add to that I think dental care across the board for everybody is the first step in healthcare.
yeah. And it's a big problem.
Yes, it is.
Sir?
Senator King, congratulations. Thank you for coming down. Just a couple quick things to add on to your list. So, haven't heard Afghan Adjustment Act talked about yet.
Okay.
That's definitely one of our priorities. It actually hits home here in Maine. We actually have quite a few refugees that are staying with service members here in Maine that are advocating for that, and most of the stuff in the language has been coming out of Maine for advocacy around that too.
Good.
So that's definitely a big thing. From that perspective, you know, all of us had this motto, don't leave anyone behind, and we probably need to live up to that at some point. Adjustment acts are not anything new. We've done them in past conflicts and other things like that, and we need to do the same here as well. Not to mention it can impact here, you know, bringing other people here and things like that to Maine as well. And then the second one that's starting to come on our radar from the Legion as well is quality of life issues in the military. So I don't know if people have seen some of the posts and other things out like there, but some of the barracks in disgrace, food issues. in
Housing at the
service,
bases is
housing-
an issue.
Housing issue, updating them, all those kind of things. So that's definitely coming out. I know there should be some additional reporting information coming out on that kind of standard of living right now. But just to put that on your radar, because that does cross over. And just to caveat what Kirk said about the Coast Guard, same thing there with your connection across the two. You know, how do we get them paid under DOD one way or the other so that they're not in limbo every time the government decides they want to play shutdown?
Well, the housing thing was a semi-scandal, because what happened was that a lot of the housing on bases was contracted out to the private sector, but nobody really enforced the contracts. And we've had a lot of work on that in the Armed Services Committee. I think it's better, but it was really, I mean, people were living, families were in houses with mold and, you know, really bad. It was, you know, we don't have bases up here, but in a lot of the bases around the country, it was a really serious problem. And it was a problem of oversight, basically. It was a problem of administering the contracts and holding these contractors to their commitments. And we talked about a tenant's bill of rights and these kinds of things, which I think have made improvements. That's Tim Kaine in Virginia and Tom Tillis in North Carolina have been real champions of that, particularly because of the bases that they have. I think we're getting close.
Mr. San Pedro.
Yes. Steve.
Congratulations, Senator King. Steve San Pedro. I'm a member of the National Legislative Committee for the VFW. I've been biting my tongue because there's actually a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about with TAP. Over the last 3 years, we've passed. Though that going to TAP a year out is now approved. Using the TAP after is now approved. There's so many things that we mentioned here, I can't remember them all, but the problem is there's no oversight. And that, we've come to you, to all of you, year after year, asking for oversight on these laws. I don't know them all off the top of my head. I can get them for you because I have them in my notes. But all of this stuff has been passed. One of them is when the service member is leaving the service, they are now required to contact their home state and set them up with the Bureau, and they're not doing it. And that was one of the big pushes on the last bill. The other thing that I want to talk about is the Major Richard Starr Act. There's huge misconceptions that it is going to cost millions and millions and millions of dollars. Not every single one of those veterans, which is a little over 50,000 of them, are going to use that. It's going to be your service members that have a long-term in the service, like Major Richard Starr, who had 16 years in service and then was discharged for medical reasons. It would have benefited him because he would have got a higher retirement pay and still got his VA pay versus the special compensation pay that you get when you're retired. An E3 that gets out, and that special compensation pay is going to be more than the VA benefits and the retirement, so they're going to stay with what they're already getting. So for the CBO to say that it's going to cost this much, it's not going to cost that much. So we want to make sure that everybody understands that. We brought that point. That's the VFW's stance on it, is that it's service is your retirement. You earn that for serving. The VA benefits is for injuries incurred during your service.
Right, and they're separate. They're separate.
But we know that right now it's too big of an ask to get all of it. So that's why we've come multiple times asking for the Major Richard Starr Act to be passed, because that's just a little piece of the pie, and then once we get that, we're going to go for another piece. And we're going to keep going until we get it, but it's very important to understand.
Why doesn't that surprise me, Steve?
You know, we keep asking. I hate that four-letter word that we keep hearing. You like to use it a lot. Fund. Who's going to fund it?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, the good news is this is one of Tester's priorities for this year.
Perfect. And then the last one that I had was oversight on there's a law passed for all veterans' homes for the VA stipend. Our new CEO is coming she's speaking with you or your staff on Thursday of this week. Mm-hmm. We need some oversight on that because it's in rulemaking.
On
the
what?
law's been passed.
Oversight on which?
On the VA stipend for the main veterans homes. What's happening is the veterans homes are still admitting these veterans that should be getting that,
right,
but aren't getting it because it's in rulemaking. And
and
nobody's
the rulemaking has gone on for like 2 years.
Yes.
Yep.
And so as it stands right now,
I've reached out directly.
It's like $600,000 a month we're losing.
Yep.
In the VA stipend across all of the homes, and it's slowly increasing because the other home or all the residents that were grandfathered in are either passing away or getting discharged. So we're bringing in residents, but we're not getting that stipend.
Yeah.
So we need some oversight on getting that rulemaking done, and possibly we're coming to you to ask for a waiver to get paid and told.
It's ridiculous. I've been hammering Dennis McDonough about it. Here's what I tell people when they tell me how long things take. Eisenhower retook Europe in 11 months. Right. Don't tell me it's going to take 2 years to write a rule. But that's what's happened. Right. So we're going to go after that.
It's specifically the domiciliary stipend.
Right.
And it's, there's two problems with it. The eligibility problem that Steve brought up, it doesn't cover a lot of the assisted living patients that we need to admit, and we've continued to admit them.
Right.
So it's the eligibility criteria and also the amount. It's $52 a day, and it's not enough. It's not enough. That needs to be looked at too.
Well, you've given me a pretty good list. Thank you. That'll teach me to come to Post 20. Well, I want to thank everyone, and again, go back to the very beginning. I'm fired up about this assignment. I think I'm the only new member added to the committee this year, and it took some lobbying, but we got it done. And we checked last night. Maine hasn't had a senator on the Veterans Affairs Committee for almost 30 years. So I really think this is overdue for us, and I want you to take advantage of the fact that you have somebody sitting on this crucial committee and keep in touch. That's the whole idea. and I want you to fly that flag with pride over this base. Why don't we didn't start with the pledge. Why don't we end our meeting with the pledge?
Before we do that,
yeah.
Senator, on behalf of Post 20, and speaking as a town council on behalf of Brunswick, I want to thank you, one, for having this opportunity for us to meet and talk. I want to extend that opportunity anytime you wish.
Thank you.
As I said earlier, if we have an event going on, you will take precedence. But I think it's quite evident this type of meeting, from the veteran standpoint, is so important for you, for my community, for the state of Maine, and all the veterans who served God and country.
Thanks so much, Dave. Thank you. Shall we? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks, everybody.